Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to take a really deep, investigative look into a very human, and honestly, a very complex phenomenon. Academic dishonesty. I mean, we've all been there, right? You're sitting in that pressure cooker environment of an exam hall, the clock is ticking, and the stakes feel absolutely life or death. But today, we're going to explore exactly why some students decide to cross the line and cheat. We'll look at the specific rules they're breaking, and trust me, you'll want to stick around for the incredibly high-tech ways that institutions are now catching them in the act. It's wild.
Here is how we're going to break this all down today. First up, the anatomy of a cheat. Second, the motive, why we cheat. Third, crossing the line, the rules. Fourth, the investigation, statistical traps. And finally, we'll wrap up with the true cost of cheating.
All right, let's get into part 1. Anatomy of a cheat. So, I want you to mentally step back into an exam hall for a second. Think back to the last time you took a massive test. It's an environment defined by high pressure, intense scrutiny, and dead silence. It is a place where the line between success and failure feels unbelievably thin. So here's the big question we have to ask ourselves right off the bat. Why do good students risk it all? What actually pushes someone who has studied, someone who genuinely cares about their future, to jeopardize the whole shebang in a single moment of panic or calculated deception? Well, to really grasp the scale of this, we need to look at the hard data.
Just look at the staggering number on the screen, 2,225. Now, you might be thinking that's a global statistic, maybe stretched out over a decade, right? No. That is the exact number of mobile phone and smart device cheating cases recorded by Ofqual, which is the exam regulator in England, in just a single summer exam series. One summer. It's a massive, massive breach of exam protocol, and it is happening right in our schools right now.
And the severity of this issue? It really can't be overstated. Sir Ian Bauckham, the chief regulator at Ofqual, actually had to issue a direct public plea to students. He literally said, "Please leave your phone at home or hand it in before you go into the exam hall. Do not become one of those statistics." Bringing a smart device into an exam isn't just considered a minor nuisance anymore. It has been the absolute most common category of student cheating every single year since 2018. The authorities are on extremely high alert, and frankly, they're tired of seeing kids ruin their futures over a smartphone.
Which brings us to part 2, the motive, why we cheat.
Okay, so if you want to stop a rule breaker, you first have to understand the mind of the rule breaker, right? We need to unpack the psychology here. Now, what's really fascinating on this slide is data from a comprehensive sociological study by a researcher named Lahib Benarbia. When they surveyed students about why they actually cheat, the results were pretty eye-opening. You'd think it's all about ambition, right? But the fear of failing the exam came in at 76.25%, which actually outweighed the desire to obtain a high grade, sitting at 71.25%. This data proves that sheer anxiety and the absolute terror of failure are the primary drivers in that exam hall, not just some ruthless quest for perfection.
And look, we really have to validate the incredible pressure these students are feeling. Sociological studies confirm that cheating isn't always just a simple, individual moral failing. Sometimes it's a rational, albeit totally flawed, response to structural deficiencies. We're talking about overcrowded classrooms, weak supervision, ineffective assessment systems, and incredibly intense family expectations. All of this creates a climate where cheating almost becomes normalized. When the pressure to succeed hits an absolute boiling point, students desperately look for a release valve, and unfortunately, cheating becomes that valve.
There are also some really fascinating cultural drivers at play here. A study out of California State University San Marcos looked at two concepts: agency versus communion. So agency is this highly individualistic focus on your personal accomplishments and standing out from the crowd. Communion, on the flip side, focuses on social harmony, intimacy with others, and basically just not rocking the boat. The study found that individuals from collectivist cultures who lean heavily towards this communion mindset are actually sometimes more apt to tolerate cheating. Why? Literally just to maintain social harmony and meet the heavy expectations of their family or peer group. It's less about personal glory and more about not letting your people down. It just goes to show how complex the motive really is.
Moving on to part 3, crossing the line, the rules.
So regardless of the deep psychological motive, there is a very rigid institutional reality that students bump up against. Exam boards operate on a strict zero-tolerance policy. They define these rule breaks officially as malpractice. The most common rap sheet includes having unauthorized phones or smartwatches, and yes, that counts even if you just accidentally left it in your pocket. It includes the old-school methods like bringing in hidden notes or writing on correcting fluid. It also includes exchanging signals with classmates. And get this, studies show that covert signaling is used by a massive 57.5% of cheaters. Then, on the more extreme end, you've got impersonation, literally having someone else take your test, and outright plagiarism in coursework.
Now, this brings up the incredibly hard boundaries that institutions draw, particularly when we talk about coursework and assignments outside the exam hall. The Institute of Chartered Accountants of Scotland, or ICAS for short, provides this brilliant breakdown. They highlight the crucial difference between permitted collaboration and prohibited collusion. Take a second to notice the incredibly fine line between what is actively encouraged by teachers and what suddenly crosses into outright academic dishonesty.
Let's clarify this distinction because it is vital. Collaboration is perfectly fine. It's actually encouraged. That means asking a classmate to clarify a tough concept, or just discussing a general approach to a project. But the very second you cross into collusion, which means writing the exact answer together, or having a friend do the heavy lifting on a data analysis for your final submission, you have broken a severe rule. Helping a friend understand the material? Totally encouraged. Doing the work for them? That is a punishable offense every single time.
All right, let's jump into part 4, the investigation, statistical traps. So how do the authorities actually catch students who think they've smoothly gotten away with it? Well, welcome to the CSI portion of our explainer. Exam boards like Cambridge, they aren't just relying on teachers pacing up and down the aisles anymore. They use high-level statistics. There's this fascinating mathematical concept highlighted by the ginger mathematician called the bimodal distribution trap. Here's how it works. In a fair exam, scores naturally form a single smooth bell curve. That's peak 1. But when widespread cheating happens, a highly unnatural second peak emerges on the graph. That peak represents artificially inflated scores. Thanks to the central limit theorem, even if you only have a small sample size of a few dozen students, that unnatural second peak becomes glaringly obvious to statisticians. It is a mathematical trap, and it is almost impossible to evade.
And hey, if you're sitting there thinking, well, I take traditional paper-based exams, so I'm totally off the digital grid, you might want to think again. Cambridge Assessment actually digitally screens detailed marks straight from paper exams. The physical papers are scanned, they're marked online, and then those marks are fed directly through an advanced, highly sensitive pattern-matching algorithm. The system basically assumes that if students are colluding, their marks are going to look highly similar. It automatically flags specific exam centers with a red alert where these similarities pop up. That allows human investigators to swoop in, pull the physical papers, and visually inspect them for cheating.
Stephen Hunt, who is the head of compliance at OCR, one of the UK's leading awarding bodies, actually spoke about this exact technology. He stated, "Another weapon in our armory is always welcome. This new screening service fills a gap in our ability to detect malpractice and will be a handy addition to the resources used to maintain the integrity of an exam." So that's the cold, hard reality of it. Examiners aren't just relying on their eyes to catch a wandering gaze anymore. They are armed to the teeth with big data, and they are actively hunting for anomalies.
Finally, let's get into part 5, the true cost of cheating.
So what actually happens when those statistical traps snap shut and a student gets caught? We need to talk about the cascading effect of doom that follows a guilty verdict for malpractice. It usually starts off with a formal warning, but it scales up quickly to a total loss of marks for a section or an entire unit. Next up is outright disqualification from one or more exams. And then the final, most devastating step is debarment. That means being completely banned from taking future exams for a set period of time. It leaves a permanent stain on your academic record that follows you around for years, and believe me, universities and employers will absolutely see it.
Remember those 2,225 mobile phone cases we talked about at the very beginning of this explainer? Well, of those cases, a massive 545 resulted in the ultimate penalty, total disqualification. That is over 500 individual students who had their university dreams, their apprenticeship offers, and their early career prospects permanently altered, all because of a single, terrible, split-second decision in the exam hall.
But wait, it isn't just the students facing the music here. The collateral damage is actually huge. Exam boards enforce incredibly strict rules against what they call maladministration. Basically, if exam center staff fail to maintain full supervision, or if they improperly handle exam papers, or even just fail to report suspected cheating, they are facing severe penalties too. Teachers and invigilators can be handed written warnings, they can be suspended, or get this, the entire school could have its recognition as an exam center completely withdrawn. That impacts hundreds of completely innocent students.
And the true cost of all this extends so far beyond just high school walls and temporary exam centers. That California State University San Marcos study we talked about earlier highlights a really alarming classroom to the boardroom pipeline. The researchers wrote, "Today's business student becomes tomorrow's business professional. Therefore, business professors must be particularly concerned about honesty and ethics." So, academic dishonesty isn't just viewed as a high school problem. Researchers actually view it as a direct predictor of future professional ethics in the global economy.
Which leaves us with one final pretty heavy question to chew on as we wrap up today's explainer. If a habit of deception is formed early on, under the intense pressure of secondary education, is the person cutting corners in their high school exam the exact same person cutting corners in the corporate boardroom years later? It is a really profound thought on the long-term societal impact of cheating. Thank you so much for joining me today to unpack the fascinating anatomy of a rule breaker.